I found this helix which starts to show kind of like a fabric as you draw more and more of these helixes. It was easier to draw at a 30-foot diameter, but because there are parameters in place, I can change here this parameter that I established to something smaller for the radius and get this kind of tubular fabric looking, or not fabric, but we were looking at the muscle structure and how there are those kind of strands of muscles that go through an arm or a muscle, and then we can change the height over here to something smaller or or larger as we look at how to apply it. So I'm thinking we can start off by making this, and then I'm going to look into how we can take this piece and apply it to a pattern so that we have an entire sheet of a collection of these. So for this example, what we have are two drawings: the mass, the conceptual mass, and the adaptive family that has a spline that has these adaptive points. So I'm going to go ahead and start a brand new one, and then you can follow along with me to create one as one of our new forms. Okay, so we'll start a new family, and the family will be a conceptual mass. So you can go to the big R in the top left corner and pick conceptual mass, new conceptual mass, or family, and then double click on conceptual mass and pick mass. And then in this one we can give it a name. I'll call it mass 1. And in this file we're going to create a second level, and we can hold our control key down and our shift key, and then hold our left mouse button down on the level, drag that level up and let go of our mouse button, and we have a second level. Set this work plane current by selecting it, and then we'll draw our first radius circle down here, doesn't matter how big it is, and then we'll select here the second level and draw a circle, and look for those dashed lines that show you that you're right at the exact center of the bottom one here, and then click. And then we can select the circle and pick the small dimension here to make it a permanent dimension, and then select the dimension itself so that we can use this drop down in the options bar to add a parameter. So we'll pick add a parameter, and for this one we'll name it R1 and pick OK. And then in this one, when we select it and make it a permanent dimension, when we select the dimension itself, we'll just drop this label down and make it R1 too. So we should be able to check these by going into the family types under properties here and changing the R1 to something different. We'll make it 20, and they both 20 feet, and they both should change. Okay, so we know we have that right. And we can make here a height parameter by selecting this vertical plane and then selecting measure here for the aligned dimension, picking this bottom level and bringing our mouse up to the second level so that we can have a height from the first level to the second level. And because this is already a dimension that's permanent, we can select it, go to label, and add a parameter, and we'll just call this one H1. Now we should be able to check that when we go into the type properties here, the family types, I should say, and we change our height to 50 feet and pick apply, we should be able to see that the circles will change in their height too. So now we know that we have our parameters set correctly. We can now select these two circles by holding our control key down and pick create form, solid form. Now let's select here the top surface and pick divide surface, and we'll change the U and V grids to something small like 2 for both of them. And then use your tab key if you need to select this surface on the left side and divide the surface and make the U grid 8 and the V grid will make that 4. And we're really making it 8 because I'm going to create a spline that has 9 points, and we can kind of walk ourselves around this cylinder to create our helix. And so let's do the same thing with the backside surface. We'll divide it and change here the grid, the U grid to 8 and the V grid to 4. Now we need to establish our nodes that we can snap to, so we'll need to select the divided surface and then pick the title surface representation, small arrow right to the right of that surface representation, so that you can pick here in front of nodes and pick OK. And then we'll do the same thing for the back side here. Select it, pick the small arrow to the right of surface representation, put a check mark in nodes. And now we're ready to go over and create a family that is a spline that we can use this cylinder to attach it to. So let's go to create a family, application menu, new, family, and this time we're going to pick generic model adaptive. In here we'll place these point elements, and we're going to pick points to establish kind of a spline and make the points kind of equally apart and not that far out of a curve. So what do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We can select all of these points and pick the spline through points to create a spline through those points. And then we're going to select the points so that we can make them adaptive. In order to select just the points, we can select the whole thing and then pick the little filter icon here at the bottom right and take the check mark out of line so that we just have our reference points. Pick OK. And now that we just have the points selected, we can pick make adaptive. And you can see already that your spline is, your points are adaptive points. Now we can save this file as spline 1 and then load it. Now we can carefully pick points, those nodes that represent here one of the top ones, and then one level down and one grid over, and then continue to go around the cylinder, picking here one grid over and one level down until we pick all 9 points to go around here and create our helix. It's important, I think, to keep moving it because sometimes the lines, the intersections line up with what's going on behind it. Okay, if you accidentally escaped out too many times, you can always go to the project browser and drag and drop this spline 1 to start it again. So I'm going to go ahead and place my splines here from the next panel over and then down one level and one panel over until I have splines starting from all of these top 4 points. We could have divided this surface even I'm going to you can pause the video if you'd like and continue to put your splines on here until you get all 4 of them. Actually, I started from the second or middle point, and I did say to do each 4 of the 4, which is what the example was when I first started, but I imagine that more splines will make it look more like a muscle or a fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and do a few more splines, but if you just want to start with the 4 basic here quadrants of the circle, that works really well. Okay, now we have all of the model line splines. Let's go back using Control Tab, if you'd like, to the spline 1 file. If we create geometry from this model line, we'll lose the model line. And one of the things I picked up from online is that you can turn on and off the visibility of an object by creating a parameter. So to do this, first we'll turn this model line into a reference line and then create the geometry. That's the first step. So highlight the spline and then in properties put a check mark in front of is reference line. Put a check mark in front of is reference line and pick apply, and then we're going to place a point using the point element on the spline that we can use as a reference for our circle. We can then select that point, and we could set that plane current, but it's already selected, so it's ready to be drawn on. We can pick the circle tool, and then with this point selected, we can pick the circle tool. You can see that that plane becomes bigger for us to draw on, and then pick here for the center point and draw a small circle. Then we can select the circle and the spline using your control key to select both and create form, solid form. If we change here the visible display to wireframe, we can see that reference line and turn it back into a model line, select it, and then take the check mark out of here is reference line. And the reason we did that is that we're going to select the geometry and make it so that we can turn it on and off. That way we'll only be able to see the model lines, and it'll make our complex shape a little bit easier for us to work with. So use the tab key until you see the whole thing selected here, form element, and then select it. And then over here in the properties, you can look for visible and then pick that small little icon to the right of visible so that you can create a parameter that is of type yes, no. To turn it on and off, you can pick add parameter, and then we can call this here spline geometry on off. And then by creating this parameter, we'll be able to turn on and off the geometry and only use the model line, making it easier for us to work with. I can go ahead and pick OK and pick OK. Now that we have this spline ready, we can change it back to maybe shaded, so you can see kind of the shaded view of it, and save it and load it, save it, and then load it back into the project. And when you do, you want to pick override the existing version and its parameter values, and then the parameters are brought into the drawing with the spline. So now I can select the spline, and if I wanted to, I could go over to edit type as we're starting to put more splines and create a tighter look on this detail. Here's that parameter that we just created. We can take the check mark out and here pick apply, and you'll see that the geometry turns off so that we can work with it a little bit easier as we start to get even more of these splines created. I'm going to go ahead and turn the geometry back on, and then let's check our parameters. We should be able to go into the family types here and change our radius to something a little bit smaller, maybe 5 feet. And now we see this kind of column of threads. And the last time I tried this, it didn't work, but let's take a look at changing our height to something a little bit taller, like 80 feet, and it didn't work. So for some reason the height isn't connecting with the piece. The level isn't connecting with it. I think it might have been the original circle that I created. So I'll make a note in the video that you make sure that that original circle is on level 2 by selecting level 2 and then drawing it. I think I did that, but I'll go back and check. Anyways, this does look like something that we should maybe use as one of our models that we researched, and my next step will be to take a look at using this as an adaptive pattern, or a model that can be put into a grid, and how those grids will connect so that we can get more of these in multiple forms. Okay, have fun.